So welcome to this webinar on Org Discovery. This is one of the webinars we're running around Dreamforce. If you missed yesterday's webinar, that was all around mapping the aviation gin process with Ryan Reynolds, the actor. And we've got some 3 aviation gin bottles there, which are being sent to 3 lucky people who won them. So as with all webinars, this will be recorded and you'll be sent the recording, and also you'll be sent a link to the Org Discovery process. If you've got any questions, post them in the chat and one of the team will answer them as we're going along, and we'll have some time at the end for some questions. So why Org Discovery? Maybe you're a consultant and therefore you're walking into a new org. Maybe it's you're a new employee, so it's day one as the admin or the business analyst or the developer needing to understand what the org is. Or maybe you've got to a point in the org where you're starting to do some tech debt assessment or some cleanup or optimization. So it doesn't matter which of those situations you're in, then what you need to do is find out what's in the org. And maybe this is the picture of your org. Yes, it's complicated. There are a number of connections. Maybe it's a little bit opaque. If you're in this situation, you're probably really, really lucky, because actually this is the situation that most people are in. Groping around in the dark, trying to make sure you don't trip over anything which is going to explode and hurt you. So probably this is what it's like on day one of your org discovery. So the first reason we're doing this is to understand the risk. Now the obvious one is technical risk. If I make some changes, what am I going to go and break? Am I going to break the org? The second is operational risk. You may be making changes to the org and not realize the implications that other areas of the business are maybe using some of those objects or using some of those workflows, and therefore you cause a problem to the operation. Or even worse, if you're highly regulated, you may make changes and not realize that actually you're putting the business at risk from either compliance or regulatory risk. So that's the first reason, obviously, is to get a handle around what's the risk of the org. But the second is probably more important, which is understanding the direction that you're trying to take the Salesforce org. We need to think like product managers. What's the roadmap of what we're trying to do with Salesforce? What direction are we trying to go? And I've said velocity, not speed. For those of you who are scientists, we're not just trying to go faster, that's speed. We're trying to actually increase our velocity, and that velocity is speed in a given direction. So we really need to know where we're trying to take the org, and more importantly, where our senior management is trying to take the org, so we can align our roadmap with what they're trying to do. What's the business trying to do? What are the business challenges? What's the digital transformation that the organization is trying to go through? And then how do we support that and make sure that Salesforce is growing in the right way and at the right speed in terms of being able to change it rapidly? And the third thing about this org discovery is we can start to engage our senior management. Quite often people have the challenge that they are building the Salesforce org, they don't get the level of support they need at a senior level, they certainly don't get the level of investment at a senior level. So this is an opportunity to start to engage that executive level, so you then get the support you need. So back in 2017, Forrester wrote an article or a report, and they termed it the Salesforce at Scale dilemma. This is just one quote out of that report. The complexity of scale crushes Salesforce's responsiveness. As Salesforce use grows, innovation slows and flexibility evaporates. Now in the report, they actually say that that doesn't have to happen, and they identify 5 things that you should do. And there'll be a link at the end of this to that, a summary of that report. So we've identified that we need to obviously understand what's in the org, and we've spent time documenting the way that you should do that, what we're calling the org discovery process. And I say it's a proven process here. We've had consultants using it, we've had admins using it. There's a quote there from one of the consultants. We allocated 2 weeks for the discovery, but it was done in less than a week, and I'm going to look like a superhero. And it wasn't just one consultant, there was a small team working on that project. And I happen to know that one of the outcomes was they changed the direction of the piece of consulting they were going to do. The client had asked them to merge 2 orgs. Once they'd done the discovery work, they realized that one org was War and Peace, and the other was Dilbert, and it was impossible to merge those two unless they had done quite a lot of remedial work to the larger org. So rather than just simply doing what the customer wanted, they had a chance with greater insights to give better advice, better recommendations that was going to take the customer forward more quickly. Another quote there from another smaller consulting firm: we reduced the time taken to analyze a new org from 2 weeks to 3 days. Now you might say, if you're a consultant, well, hang on, that's work I was going to get, so that's reducing the amount of revenue I'm going to get from that client. The client doesn't value the days you're doing discovery. That first consultant said, great, we've got an extra week there, which we can then do more detailed analysis. Actually, it's accelerating the amount of analysis we can do. So don't think of this as lost revenue. Think of this as greater insight and a chance to give your customer better recommendations. And this org discovery process doesn't necessarily have to be paid. I certainly know that some consultants are now doing this as a piece of free work, as a way of opening up new opportunities in customers. They're saying, right, we'll do a piece of org assessment work and org analysis work. Once we've discovered what's in there, we can make some recommendations. And that's the way they're starting to win new work. So that's the point of view from a consulting partner. There's a quote there from Org Confessions, which is, the new admin quits 3 weeks into a job because they said the org was too complex. And I know that's a fear for many admins walking into a brand new job, not understanding what they're inheriting. So I said we created an org discovery process. There it is. It's got really 2 phases. The first section is all about how well run the org is. And then the second section is all about adoption and the level of technical debt. And as you can see, it's a process map. You wouldn't expect anything else from us. But the outcome is obviously a report, some recommendations to the customer, or if you're an employee, to your boss, to say, look, this is what I found. And whilst we're not forcing you into any standard report, we're giving you, in our discovery process, we're giving you some ideas and saying maybe some of the things that you should be putting in that report. And therefore, the analysis you do as you go through the process will start to give you the evidence to build that report. So it's things like expectations, assumptions versus like the reality, the structure, the complexity, and the size of the org. What levels of user adoption? How well documented is it? How secure are you in terms of data and privacy protection? What backlog of change requests are there? And then ultimately a list of recommendations. So once you've done this analysis, what do you suggest needs to happen next? So let's go and have a look at the process map and step our way through the first phase, which is all around how well run is the org. So here is the overall org discovery process. As you can see, it's an elements process map, which means that there are attachments, there are notes there. Why start with the org assessment? Some notes, also links there to, in case running the org assessment. Some items have more information, notes, and links to supporting material or training material. Down here, we have a link to the structure of the final report. So starting to talk about the report in a bit more detail, and obviously all these bullet points, you'll be capturing the information as you work your way through this process. So the first thing we need to do in terms of this phase up here is run the org assessment. When I click there, that will run the org assessment. When we're running through this process, it's not just using elements, it's using a set of tools, all of which are freely available. So the org assessment, which you've just looked at, as I said, it's free to use as many times as you want. We'll be using Salesforce Optimizer. We'll be using the trial version, the proof of concept version of elements to create this, the analysis. So let's start at the beginning. We're going to go through this first phase, which is all around the direction of Salesforce. And what we're suggesting here is that you run the org assessment. So the org assessment is an implementation maturity assessment. This is nothing to do with the technical complexity of the org, but it's thinking about how well the org lifecycle is run. So how well we capture, how well we build, how we deliver, how we operate, and then the governance. So those 5 phases, there are 64 questions. You rate any of the questions from 0 to 10. It takes about 20 minutes to go through the questions, and at the end of it, you end up with a report. What's really valuable is in that report, you have this spider diagram, which shows which areas you're strongest and which you're weak. Each of the different sections, we give you a detailed score, but also some links to useful resources to help to improve that score. The assessment is free to take. You can take it as many times as you want. If you're a consultant, obviously you can take it with work through with every single one of your clients. If you're an employee, then you can run it maybe every 6 months so you can track progress. The valuable thing about the spider chart is it's a very visual way of saying, okay, this is where we're really strong and we should be celebrating, and these are the areas where we're weak and we need investment. So if you're doing this every 3 months, every 6 months, you can see measurable progress. So let's have a look at the org assessment. So here the first phase is analyze. There are 20 questions in this section. And all we have to do is rate whether in this case, the stakeholders are able to submit change requests easily. Yes, we do it consistently. This does not happen at all. Second question, change requests are captured in a central repository. So again, you can rate it. And you get the principle, simply work your way through all the different questions. This is all the questions associated with analyze, click next, and then we're on to the next section, which is all around build, deliver, operate, and then governance. You'll get an assessment, and then you can download your assessment report. Fantastic. So we've now run the org assessment. We need to discuss and evaluate the findings of the org assessment with either our client or if you're an employee with your management. Then obviously we then need to understand the business drivers, the purpose of the org, the roadmap, what the return on investment expectations are for the org. And again, there are some business questions that you should be asking. There's also a link there to an article about every org needs a center of excellence. And then finally, we need to think about Salesforce from a technical perspective, not the nitty-gritty, but actually how it fits within the overall IT landscape. So are there key integrations? How many orgs have we got? Are they classic or lightning? What are the plans for migrating from classic to lightning? So at the end of this phase, we then have a good understanding about the maturity of the implementation, but also the direction we're trying to take it. That means we can then get into the second phase, which is all around understanding the technical complexity of the org. Now, as I said at the beginning, all of this can be done with freely available tools. So the first thing we want to do is run Salesforce Optimizer. That's the application that Salesforce provides internally. You kick it off. There are the instructions on how you kick off Salesforce Optimizer. It takes up to 24 hours to produce the report, and that report is then used in this step, box 8. The second thing we need to do is we need to connect elements so that can then do the analysis of your org. It pulls all the metadata into a metadata dictionary, and then it does detailed analysis of dependencies, field population, field where used. And we'll be using that to quickly understand the scope and the complexity of the org. It will make life significantly easier than wading our way through setup. So if you remember at the beginning of this presentation, we talked about consultants saying it halved the time to do their org analysis. That's one of the reasons. So there are the instructions on how you would use elements and synchronize the org. And then we have some notes there about how we look at the org analytics report that Elements creates, how we look at the org size and structure, the complexity of the architecture, but also then how we might draw out some entity relationship diagrams. Now, I know that we have schema builder, but sometimes that's a bit overwhelming, and sometimes you just need to focus in on a particular area and build out an entity relationship diagram. So let's go and have a look at the org model and the analytics that Elements creates for us. So it takes between 10 minutes and 2 hours to synchronize the org. It takes about 2 minutes to set up the sync. And when it's finished its sync, it gives you an overview of everything that's in the org. You can see here 125 custom objects, 13 managed packages. Again, we've seen some truly horrendous orgs out there. We managed to synchronize those and do the analysis. So thousands of custom objects, hundreds of thousands of reports, 12,000, 15,000 dashboards. So we pull all that into this tree structure, and any one of these items you can open up, and then the right-hand side there is context sensitive. So I've clicked on this particular Apex class. It's then giving me some information about maybe dependencies. It's even given me an area there where, as I work my way through and start to discover things, I could even take some notes and start the optimization. So not only is it giving you analysis, but it's also giving you a place where you can start to add those notes. And at the end of it, you can produce a report with all the optimization recommendations. If I go down a little bit further, let's pick, say, an object, and maybe go into, say, custom objects. You can see the object description. Let's pick one I know well. Let's pick one that's called space. So now it's giving me a summary of the object, how many custom fields, how many validation rules, a number of records by record type. It's also then giving me an assessment of all the fields. So green means the fields are well used, they have data in them. Red means that they have either no data or very limited data. So again, it's giving me a view about how well this particular object is used. If I click on the dependency tab, it will tell me how well each field is populated. So I can see these fields are 100% populated. These fields obviously are less well populated. If I slide down a little bit further, we have something called dependency analysis. I'll just click on that. And what that's doing is it's telling me where this object is used, but not just to a single level, where this is used, but then where those items are used and where those items are used. And this is running the dependency analysis. So you can see here a fairly complex object, but if I click on any one of those, it will go out to the next level of detail. That Apex class is clearly called by more Apex classes, and that's also launched flow. Any one of these I can either scroll in so I can see more detail. If I click on any item, either here, we can open up that item in our org model, which is the tree, or I can open up in Salesforce setup. At an object level, again, same thing, click there, it'll open up inside our tree, or there it will open up the object inside setup. Let's go down a little bit further. Inside space, we can now see, list views, page layouts, process builder workflows, record types. If I open up, say, fields for a moment, there we can see all the fields. If there's italics there, it shows that's the description of the field. So clearly we've documented it well in terms of descriptions. So I'm looking at this field called contact. It's a custom field, that's what the C means, on a custom object called space. I can see the description there, the Salesforce description. I can even edit it right here. If I go to the where used, I can see that it's populated only 3% of the time of those 7,000 records. I believe we look at up to 50 million records. I can see that it's used in one Apex class. If I click there, it'll open up inside setup. It's used in 2 flows. It's used in 2 page layouts. It's used in 1 report. It's used in 1 validation rule. If I roll over the validation rule, it'll actually tell me what that validation rule is. And it's not been found in any of those 10 other places. And rather like with the object, I can also run dependency analysis at a tree level, at a field level. So I can see there is the field that we're looking at. I can see that it's used in another custom field. I can have a look, see the information about that. But because it's got a blue plot, I can obviously open that up. That custom field is used in those flows. So suddenly we're getting a better picture of the complexity of this org. we can see there are some Apex classes there that are calling other Apex classes. And whilst it may have been simple thinking I could change that field called contact, you can see the knock-on effect. Obviously, there's a lot more to the our org model and the analysis, but I'm just giving you a sense of some of the analysis that we do for you the moment it is synchronized. This is all done automatically for you. We're also pulling all the managed packages in, so you can do some analysis on those. So up here, we have a link to the org analytics report. This is giving you an overview of the org. So how big it is, and you can see down the left-hand side a series of menu items. I'm not going to go through every single one, but some interesting things like what percentage of descriptions are completed. This actually is our own org, so I'm very comfortable that we are fairly well documented. That when you're looking at org, probably those are very red. How well populated are all the fields, both custom and standard objects? So this is how well populated are the fields. Here is a view about how well used are the fields. So not just how well populated, but are those fields used in workflows, in validation rules, in page layouts. So again, the combination of these two starts to give you an understanding about whether the org is being well used. Now, obviously, there will be objects there which were created and have never been used. What you can do using these reports, you can start to hone in on the areas of the business that are of the greatest concern. Maybe the customer, if you're a consultant, or the senior management, they already know what the problems are. It's probably going to be, account, lead, contact, case, or opportunity. Those are typically the places that cause the greatest problem. But again, there may be some standard objects, there may be some managed packages, which are very complex. So with the output from Salesforce Optimizer, that report, and the information coming out of Elements with the org analytics report, but also that tree and all the reporting that you can do on that tree, it will then enable you to start to understand the complexity of the org. You could also, as I said, build an entity relationship diagram. Let me just show you an example of that. Whilst you may think Elements is a process mapping tool for documenting operational business processes, we also have all the terminology, the shapes, the notations, so that you can start to build data models. Now, as I said, there is data schema, schema builder, which is inside Salesforce, and that gives you a picture of the entire org. But sometimes it's useful just to pull out specific objects so you can start to understand their relationships. And you can do that very quickly using Elements. It's just a drawing tool. And there is another example. And of course, you have the opportunity to drill down because of the way the hierarchical mapping works. So in this case, role, we could drill down, or we can start to see the different phases that particular object goes through. So we can add a lot more detail, maybe than just a traditional drawing tool. And obviously, a critical area of analysis is how well is the org adopted. Salesforce is not a cheap product. It's an extremely powerful product, and therefore we need to make sure we maximize the return on investment. The quickest way to double the return on investment is to double the number of end users that are logged in every day and using it effectively. So here, we've now drilled down. We can start to look at the adoption and retention of the orgs. So again, we're using a combination of Elements and Optimizer, looking at how well dashboards and reports are used, look at how many records are in particular objects, looking at what percentage fields are populated. A really big area is starting to think about which managed packages are used. A huge opportunity to generate some very quick savings, some quick wins by identifying managed packages that maybe are still being paid for but simply aren't being used. Another big area is record types, evaluating record types. Someone said to me the other day, record types are like glitter. Once you've got them, you can never get rid of them. This is an area of development we're currently doing inside Elements to be able to give you the analysis of record types. It's really difficult to do. It's not supported by things like the dependency API. So we're having to do a lot of that coding to make sure we pull that analysis out. But that work is ongoing. So once we've understood the adoption, it's useful then to think about how well documented the org is. Obviously, a low level of documentation means it's a very high level of risk of making changes. Starting to think about how well the org is protected from a data privacy perspective. Then looking at the backlog, how many change requests are outstanding, therefore what level of change is required, and obviously how fast we're putting changes through the system. And with all of the information from both the first phase and then these steps here, we can then produce our org health check report. So I've taken you very quickly through the org discovery process. We'll give you a link to this process map. It's freely available. Anybody can access it. And you can go through that in your own time, whether if you're a consultant with a customer or if you're an admin or a developer, you can start to take this approach to produce that report for your own org. So some key takeaways from this session. First of all, this org discovery is a fundamental basis for engagement. If you're a consultant clearly walking into a new client, you need to have as much information as possible, as quickly as possible, to be able to establish your credibility, to enable you to give the recommendations to the customer, and also to manage the risk of the engagement. There's nothing worse than starting an engagement saying you think this piece of work will take 30 days, than to discover, 50 record types, 10 managed packages, and suddenly those 30 days balloons to 50. If you're an employee, this is a great way of starting to understand at a senior level what's expected of the org, and you can engage and start to get that level of senior level support that you need. Or if you're just about to start a tech debt assessment or a cleanup exercise, this is a critical first step. The second takeaway is absolutely you could do all this wading your way around setup, trying to build some spreadsheet, but having these sorts of tools accelerates that work massively, but it also improves the results. I think if you think back to that tree structure, that dependency tree that I showed you, to do that would be massively time consuming. And by the time you'd finished it, any changes that have been made to the org mean that whatever you've created is immediately invalidated. The important thing about using tools like Elements, that it's synchronizing the org and doing the analysis every night. So you know that the information you're using is up to date. And the final point is, yes, it's an investment, but it's only an investment of a few days, and it's a massively positive return on investment. So you need to buy a few days' time to actually get ahead of the game to do this org discovery, because that will give you back an enormous amount of time later on. Just think, some of the things that you discover here will prevent you making mistakes that could cause huge issues later. If I think about one of the org assessments, number 707, someone said they removed a field which destroyed a number of dashboards and 2 weeks of their life. So time spent here will give you a really solid basis for any future development work, for any reduction in technical debt. So I said there's some next steps. The org discovery process, you can click on that link there and it will take you to the article and also the link to the process diagram. This webinar will be sent to you, and if you want to spend time with us thinking about a proof of concept, or if you're a consultant, you want to understand the best way of using this to engage customers, please contact us at success@elements.cloud. So thank you so much for joining us on this short webinar.